Okay, so I decided to start with a bit about the AP exam because there was a lot of confusion since the AP exam has changed from previous years, and some people have old review books or have friends or older siblings who have taken it before, and there's just a lot of misconceptions about the test, and I want to make sure everybody's on the same page and you kind of know what you're going into this week and how to study and how to think about what you're studying and prioritize yourself without going crazy. So I'm calling this PowerPoint the AP examination and the final, what to think about and study from the big picture to the subatomic. I think I'm being quite clever, of course. So my neighbor is hammering, so hopefully that doesn't drive you crazy like it's driving me crazy. I tried to get in as quiet a place as I could, and my dog is right next to me crying every time I stop petting her, but that is as normal. So, I put some links in here. I am aware that you probably cannot easily click on them, but I will post the actual PowerPoint on Schoology so you can just go right to the PowerPoint and click on the links from there. And they're just from the College Board website. Okay, so as you know from the syllabus, these are the big ideas that we've been working with all year long. So instead of focusing so much on minutia and memorization, keep coming back to these four ideas to make sure that you know how to explain them. When you are studying, I would constantly practice explaining through writing and orally uh, the ideas of homeostasis, the ideas of evolution. So when you go back, we kind of did evolution at the end of this year. Next year, I think I would do it at the beginning. But when you review photosynthesis, now go back and try to think about, look at a timeline of all of life on the planet and think about how plants evolved. Think about how we got from bacteria that survived on a planet with no oxygen to a planet that's thriving with oxygen. How did we get there? And we've gone over that briefly, but could you explain that? Would you be able to make a hypothesis or explain a process of the first photosynthetic organism? So that's what I mean about coming back to these big ideas and practicing the explanations. Okay, so the stuff that I'm showing you comes from this booklet, the course and exam description, effective fall 2012. So before this, these four big ideas, this was not how we taught it. Okay, and that's why when we were talking about anatomy and physiology, I said, okay, we didn't, have to teach you every system of the body in such great detail anymore. It was about focusing on those three systems of the body this year. So this year was about giving you more depth in certain areas, being able to understand homeostasis across the big concepts instead of covering 65 chapters. So I think if you take a good look at this course and exam description and go through the objectives and say to yourself, which of these objectives are the places where I'm weak, you will have a good idea about where you need to study because the exam is based on the objectives. So this is that link for the objective. So when you can obviously type it in from here. You can just pause and type it in, or do a little quick Google search for it, or go to Schoology and do it that way. But if you're not in my class, obviously you have to go at it from a different perspective. It's a really, really long booklet. It's like 135 pages, so I don't think you want to type it out. But it goes through the objectives in great detail. So it goes through the four big ideas, and then for each of the four big ideas, it has many, many sub-objectives, and that's what our syllabus has been based upon. And it'll become really obvious to you if you go back and look at our syllabus that that's what we've been teaching you. So look through those and see, what we've missed. Where have we had to kind of cut out because of time, or where have we said review this on your own, or what, oh yeah, we taught that, but I don't remember it. Where are you weak? What could you not explain at this point? Okay, so there's a whole bunch of sample questions in there. Some of them are definitely from old exams from the past. Some of them seem to be me to be new. Also in the AP Biology section of the College Board, there are two brand new sample exams. I highly recommend you go through them since the exam format has completely changed, and we'll talk about the format in a little bit. But I picked this question out of there just to show you something that might be an example of something that would throw you off. So it says, by discharging electric sparks into a laboratory chamber atmosphere that consisted of water vapor, hydrogen gas, methane, ammonia, Stanley Miller obtained data that showed that a number of organic molecules, including many amino acids, could be synthesized. Miller was attempting to model early Earth conditions as understood in the 1950s. The results of Miller's experiments best supported which of the following hypotheses? So you might get to the end of this question, and in my class we talked about covering up the answers because there's a tendency to not read questions and to rush to answers, and this is a kind of across the board nervous response. So you won't be allowed to have an index card, but we practiced different techniques with index cards in our hands and stuff. But if you can pretend the answers aren't there and just take a look at the question, it would be much better. So you're going to have a moment of Stanley Miller, oh my God, I don't know who it is. And there's a freak out, right? So what if we don't care about who Stanley Miller is? So then, or maybe you do know who he is, but you don't remember what he did. All right, so your next freak out might be 1950s, what? So, but then let's go back to say, well, what of those four main ideas is this really asking me about? Well, this is really asking about, do I understand what the earth is made of? So some dude named Stanley Miller had water vapor, hydrogen, methane, and ammonia. And he was trying to model early Earth. And so now and then he put electric sparks in it, okay? And he was trying to, if you could imagine what he was trying to do, if he was taking, if you just step back for a second, I'm sorry, I'm babbling this a little bit. If he had water, hydrogen gas, methane, and ammonia, creating an early Earth situation, okay, obviously it doesn't say that there was oxygen gas, all right, and a lot of electric sparks because we know there was like pretty crazy, a lot of volcanoes and lightning and storms and stuff. He's trying to understand how first life formed. If we had a bunch of carbon molecules kicking around, when did they first jump together and suddenly become a living organism? How did that occur? I mean, this is the big question. When did we go from there being molecules to there being life? What made that main reaction happen? All right, so, pay no attention to my little cupcakes. I don't want to give anything away. And there's Stanley. Hang on. Okay, so the questions here. The molecules essential to life today did not exist at the time Earth was formed. B, the molecules essential to life today could not have been carried to the primordial Earth by a comet or meteorite. The molecules essential to life today could have been formed under early Earth conditions. D, the molecules essential for life today were initially self-replicating proteins that were synthesized approximately 4 billion years ago. Do, 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 do. What do you think? And how could you process this out if you didn't understand anything about what this question is going for? And I think for C, I read could not, but it says could. So, and that might have given it away that I'm kind of leaning towards C here. Okay? That the molecules essential for life today could have formed under early Earth conditions. And if you go to your book, you can kind of read about Stanley Miller's experiment, as it was super important and has been repeated in a couple different ways. Here he is, Stanley, and this is the mechanism that he created. This is, I think, the exact picture out of your textbook, but I'm not entirely sure. So, this is the mechanism, if you can imagine it. So, in here is where we've got the primitive atmosphere created. We're having lightning, which is kind of like a bunch of electrons. We've got a heat source with water vapor, and we're having it kind of come through, cooled slightly so that we can have it kind of be a little bit colder to be added to it. Um, the other part of it here is about how the um, water comes out, a little vacuum pump here, and then we've got the electrons coming in. So, and he was able to kind of have organic compounds kind of come out of this. So, my statement here, Stanley Miller, are you kidding me, is to say that, you know, he didn't get to the point where he was able to have bacteria result from this, but by having the fundamental components of an early atmosphere, he was able to have some carbon compounds form. Right, so he kind of went one step backwards by having a bunch of the elements there and have the carbon compounds form. So this is a question about carbon compounds. All right, so oops, ah, ah, I'm a little trigger happy today. If we could go back to the question for a second. So if you could kind of calm yourself down about the freak out. The point of this question is for you to get that what we're looking at here is for you to see it as a question about the chemistry of life and recognize, doesn't matter who Stanley Miller is, that we're talking about early Earth and we're talking about compounds, and that if we're talking about somebody trying to do something with a bunch of early Earth components, what would he be trying to discover? And if you read these things, only one of them makes any sense related to any of the hypotheses we have about how carbon compounds formed or how some of the ideas are about how we went from being a rock to having compounds and gases and then water and then life. Okay? Self-replicating proteins, no. Okay, so that's how to kind of start thinking through these. And with the next, the next video I'll make will be about carbon compounds, and I'll go through a ton of these questions so you can start thinking them through. All right, anyway, there's Stanley and his gizmo. Pretty brilliant, you gotta admit. Lightning, all this stuff. You can read about them in your book, and you'll see what carbon compounds were formed. I think you'll think it's cool now. All right, anyway, now let's talk a little bit about the exam format. I hope I'm not confusing you too much. It's a Sunday, I'm a little slow. So, things have changed. It used to be straight up multiple choice and then free response questions, and now it has changed. So, this is again the link to tell you about the format. So, section 1 is 90 minutes and has a part A and part B, and this is where the most significant change is. So here we have part A is 63 multiple choice questions. And my students, you think I'm weird when I come up with 37 multiple choice questions? 63 what? I don't know. Anyway, part B is called grid in questions, and I don't know what the grid in part really means. I think when you take the practice ones, you'll start to see. I haven't gone through the full bit of the practice ones yet. I'm hoping to get to that later on tonight. So grid and questions are an integration of science and math skills. So if you think about science and math skills, we're talking about Hardy-Weinberg, chi-squared, frequency, graphing, what else? It's kind of all that comes to mind at the top of my head. I hope you have kept all your labs. If you don't have all your labs, that's okay. I'll post the lab manual fully on Schoology so that you have access to it, and you'll see both the teacher and the student guide there. You know, have at it, just to remind yourself of the main point of each lab. We certainly had to modify some given the equipment that we have at our school, but the main points are there. 0 points are awarded for questions left blank, which I guess is different than how, oops, is different than how things are on SATs and ACTs, although I'm not that familiar with those. So it's not good to leave anything blank for any reason. It doesn't help you. So it's like an FRQ. So points are not deducted for being incorrect. So if you draw a little picture of a unicorn, because you must, like, that's okay, but you're going to freak them out. Points are given for correct answers. So you want as many correct answers as possible within a given question. So if it was a Hardy-Weinberg question, you want to have as many parts of the question correct as possible, and you want to be very, very clear. And I will do a one video of just a Hardy-Weinberg question and how I would expect to see it answered for me. I don't think it helps you to just say P equals this, Q equals this. You need to make it very clear that you know what P and Q stand for. You need to make it very clear that if you're using frequency and you're using a decimal place, that you know you're using a decimal place. If you're using percent, you're using percent, and things like that. So that's for that part. So you have 90 minutes for that. So that's something you're going to need to really watch your time on. So some of the multiple choice questions will of course be straight up definition questions, super easy. Some of them will be questions that they're testing out. So don't let them freak you out. If you've never heard of it, like, do not spend a lot of time on stuff you've never heard of. There's a tendency to, even on a question that you do know, if you're confused, you pick the one that includes the vocabulary you never heard of. Don't do that. Pick the one with the vocabulary you have heard of. Okay, that's a big thing we've talked about a lot in my class. All right, so keep in mind that you want to make very educated choices on things you're confused about, and if it's an easy definition question, answer it and move on with your life. Don't go back to those to recheck those ones that were easy. Keep an eye on your time. For these math questions, you do not have any reading time. You just take this whole section at once. I hope I'm not being mouse crazy. I am being mouse crazy, aren't I? Okay, on we go. Section 2 is 8 questions. These are the free response questions, 2 long and 6 short. This is another change. They used to be all the same length. Okay, you have 80 minutes plus a mandatory 10-minute reading period. The reading period is your BFF. That's why I have the cupcakes here. Okay, 10-minute reading period is so important. Okay, we've talked a lot about mapping out your answer. And keep in mind that if, for example, you need to get 10 points in order to get 100 on a question, there may be 13 possible points there. Okay, so you do not need to fixate on the question in a way sometimes like to answer it, to keep going on and on and on. You need to be concise. So a lot of them will be, um, you know, name, explain, give an example. Name, explain, give an example. Name, explain, give an example. And the easiest way to get points is to name, explain, and give an example. Okay, so these are tips I got from them in there's a ton of stuff on their website. So for the open responses, they say just X things out. Don't bother erasing. They don't care about your handwriting. They don't care about neatness. They don't care about any of that stuff. As I've said, sentences do help. They don't want to see bullet points. For things, that if it's a free response question, they want you to fully explain. But if you've made a big mistake, just X it out. Don't waste time erasing. Just scratch it out and start over again. Make an arrow so that it's clear for them. Make sure all your graphs are labeled. Graphs should be titled. You should label X and Y axes. Label all the parts of the question you are answering. If a question has different parts, A, B, C, or D, do not answer it as one big essay because it will not be graded correctly. If it has A, B, and C parts, answer it as all different parts. When there are units, use the units, grams, milliliters, seconds, etc. Otherwise, you will lose points. If it doesn't have grams, milliliters, seconds, etc., you will not get credit. Okay, how did we do last year? We did really, really well. Okay, in biology, we did better than the national average by a lot. Okay, so you need to get, for most schools, a 3 or above in order to get credit. Sometimes credit means that you don't have to take the course and they give you the actual credit. Sometimes it means you get to move on just to the next biology course. It can mean different things depending on your school. So if you look here for biology, 32 students took the test. 43% got a 1 or a 2, and 56% got a 3, 4, or a 5. And we really had a lot of students get a 4 or a 5. We're very, very proud to say that. Okay, there was a misconception in my class that that the tests were not wrong or right, that they were like kind of all scaled nationally or something, but that's not true. The questions and tests are right or wrong. That's it. Okay, so if one year, like they have 70% nationally that get 3, 4s, or 5s, yay, they're very happy. That's an awesome thing. As you can see, our school does really, really well in statistics. You know, we don't have a ton of kids taking calculus, but those that did pretty well. So we have a lot of work to do in some of our other areas of AP, but in bio, we're really doing pretty well. AP Bio is considered to be the toughest of all the sciences in terms of the AP classes. Even though, in our school, the reputation is physics and chemistry are harder. In the national dialogue, AP Biology is considered to be the toughest. So we're doing really, really well. Okay, why bother trying? So I found this nice little AP myth versus AP reality. The myth, I don't think I will get a score high enough on the AP exam to get college credit. Reality, you don't need to get a 5. Many colleges grant credit and placement as well based on a 3 or better. Myth, taking AP courses could hurt my GPA. Reality, your decision to take an AP course shows admission officers that you're willing to take on the academic challenge of college level coursework and expectations. That's really huge. There's been some, of you who are not as motivated about the AP test as you are about, kind of your GPA and stuff, but I really can't say enough about working hard for both because the AP test, in a couple months you're going to feel like high school is not that important. College is really, really, really important. And then you'll feel like grad school is really, really important. And it just moves on like that. And so the more you can do to save yourself some coursework in college and some money, the better. Okay? Um, okay, so studying this week, okay, and I know you have other AP tests too. So make yourself a schedule, stick to it if you can, prioritize, breathe. You need to exercise, eat, and sleep. Do not pull all-nighters because they will make you weird. Um, Tips I would offer is, you can't do it all. You need to figure out how you learn best and go with it. If you know that you learn by explaining, I would practice explaining things. I used to record notes to myself and then listen to them because I had more car time and stuff than it. And like while I was walking in between classes and stuff, I would listen to notes I'd made for myself because I just didn't have time with other classes. So that was one way I squeezed in extra time. Don't bother studying things you know really well. Only study the things you don't. Stump the Chump is a game I used to play in grad school with my friends. We would study a unit at a time with each other, quizzing each other. You can do it online. There's a free site called Today's Meet, and you can do it there where you can quiz each other. You can quiz each other on Twitter. You can quiz each other in text. You can quiz each other on Schoology. I have on my website under the review materials all the there's tons of quiz questions there that you can use to test yourself. If you don't find out where you're weak, it's very hard to move forward. Do not study stuff you already know. Maximize your time, okay? And at the bottom line here, self-esteem is more important than grades and AP. Do not make yourself crazy this week. It's, much more important that you remain sane. Not to say that having a good cry some point this week won't be a good thing, or, having a little mini meltdown of whatever that looks like for you, but it's really important to stay healthy. For myself, I used to have test anxiety when I was in grad school. It wasn't until I was older, but I learned to use meditation techniques and breathing to get myself through it, and I learned to become really, really efficient at studying. And so I can't say enough about breathing, exercising, eating, and sleeping, and figuring out where you're weak and study there. So I wish you guys a lot of luck. I think this is the last bit, right? Yep. That's the end of the show. So that gives you an overview of some things. I'll post this up on Schoology and then I'll start moving into content. But I highly recommend that you look over the objectives of the course to figure out where you need to work. Good luck. Next one will be organic compounds and then cell signaling.